Here we are again in the next stage with the Anderson kilt. Now you remember when I left you in the end of the last session, we'd measured out from the edge of the first pleat. We'd measured the whole thing, marked the waist, which is 38, and then measured from the edge of the pleat to that mark, which shows 20 1/4. So then, well, actually the first thing I did is I went to the worksheet. I have a client invoice, but also a worksheet in which I keep notes about what the customer has said. And this one, he, pleat to the yellow line. He wants black straps. He wants he wants the chrome buckles. But I also checked with the with my online version, my document version, because I wanted to remind myself if he had selected what element of the tartan he'd selected to be the center of the apron. And he didn't make a note of it, or he didn't make a case about it, so I've selected the darker element. So here's our center. So again, I measured this distance. I communicate that over here. So 20 1/4 is 10 1/8 times twice. So 10 1/8 measured to that line. An inch more at the hip. I bring it over. And I pin it. I found my pins, which have just gotten hidden. I pin. Here's my other mark for the hip. Yep, there it is. I pin. Good. So there's the left side of the front apron pinned. The next thing I do, there's our deep apron pleat. Now in this case, because the tartan, the design and the size of the set really dictates how deep, once we've laid out the apron, we're going to see how deep the apron pleat is. And it's typically what happens, it's either slightly too shallow or slightly too deep. I always go for slightly too deep because we don't want cloth winding up on the floor. The guy's paid for 8 yards of kilt. He's getting an 8-yard kilt. And so it's going to be slightly deeper. Generally, as I said, I like 1/4 to 1/3. This is, there's a half. It's quite deep, but better than the other way. So having done that, I've pinned it in place to hold it. Now, the next thing I would do, but I'm not going to do now in real time, is I would sew that seam, and then having sewn that seam, I would do a running stitch along the top of the pleat to hold it in place relative to the top of the canvas. I didn't used to do that, but they were believing that when I'd sewed the top band on, that the band stitching would catch this, but a couple of times it didn't, and then it would fall down. So I take that extra time and I stitch this, a running stitch in place, and that stitch will be reinforced by the top band when we put it on. So there's the left side of the front apron done. Now you remember, when I marked the total width of the kilt, I'd marked the canvas. Now that is the edge of the apron. That's not the edge of the canvas, right? So if I was to put the mark it or make that the edge of the canvas as well as the edge of the kilt, the apron, I should say, we'd have a real problem fitting the lining. In fact, it would be just about impossible. So what I do is, and if you can see this quilting pad has a grid mark on it. So what I'm doing is I'm moving that line over so it lines up the grid. And if you don't have a quilting pad, no big deal. You could have anything. You could have a piece of cardboard. If you were didn't care about the table, you could draw a line on the table, right? But we need, I use a reference mark, and that reference mark, that is going to be the edge of the apron. So I bring the edge of the fringed edge down, which I haven't teased out the fringe yet. I do that later, of course. And I look at it relative to, now I've decided, I don't know if you can see the overlap, but there's 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to put the edge, the apron seam right there. So I take the edge, and there's a bit of guess and hemming and hawing and moving back and forth right this. I take a look at this and I think, okay, if my edge of my canvas is there and the outside edge of the fringe is there, do we want that to be right at the first pleat? I think I want it a little bit over. I'm going to put it at I'm splitting about the middle of the second fringe right there. And there, once again, I look at that, if that's the edge seam, if I bring the canvas to there, if I fold the canvas back to there, then I've got room on the underside to sew my my lining in place without messing up the fringe. Okay, so now you probably aren't going to be able to see this yellow. I'm just going to do it again in black. So if I decide, let's do this again. Okay, if the apron comes to that, that's going to work. So what I'm going to do then is I could fold it over and do this, but I'm just going to do this right now. Is bing and okay, that's done. I fold this over and it can stay in place. I bring this back and see how that chalk line where I've decided my seam is going to be is right smack on top of the folded over edge of the canvas. I'm going to reach for some more pins and scatter them willy-nilly on my work and be very careful that I don't leave them there. Harkening back to my first master who threatened to make me eat any pins I left that the client might find. So I've just temporarily pinned this down. There's 4. Okay, I've just wrinkled that. I don't like that. Flatten that out. Now, is that too deep? Because remember, this is going to fold back under the apron. So I'm going to grab there's my, that chalk mark right there that I folded to. That's the edge of the apron. So I'm going to bring that forward. Okay, that's not translating to reality, is it? Because looking on this side, 10 1/8 inches brings it just past the black line. That's not working. So why is it not working? 10 1/8. 10 1/8 is there. Let's pull that out. Back up from first principles, go to that first seam over in the other. Okay, 38 is right. So 38 is right there. If I bring this in place, that edge isn't going to, that edge, see, that's blue, and this edge isn't quite working. So let me go to the center. 9 1/4. Let's go to 9 1/4 on this side and mark it with chalk. We're going to pull these out. This is funny because sometimes, maybe often, it goes absolutely seamlessly and it's just 1, 2, 3 and away we go. This time it made itself a little complex. But it's just as well, because maybe this is a problem that you're going to run into and then you wonder what you've done wrong. Okay, pin that up. Now sometimes, right, I got to undo that pin, don't I? I'm not going to pin the hip just now, but I am going to pin it twice here at the waist. Okay, and then we bring that. What did I say? That was 9 1/8, 9 1/4, 9¼ backing up a bit. No, see, that's right. Oh, now nature's just playing with me here. I'm going to fiddle around for a bit. Let's do it one more time. The important thing here, I guess, is don't panic, don't lose your temper, just worry about, actually you don't have to worry, but just take your time and get it right. So I'm going to fiddle with it a bit more. Fiddle with it one more time, looking for symmetricity. The jury's still out, frankly, on whether, when thinking of the width of the tartan, if you're including the width of the fringe too. I tend to go with the, when I talk about the width of the apron, it's just the apron. The fringe, if I calculate it all, I calculate it separately. So this is, okay, looks like it's working this time. That is symmetric. We have a little bit of red there, which I might twist back. But first off, let's just see how my, okay, that's bang on. I'm just going to fine tune it a little bit because I'm going to tuck that under just a hair. So now we have symmetricity. And without excusing sloppy behavior, it's sometimes a comfort to know that when somebody's wearing the kilt, people can't see these two seams because of the curvature of the client, shall we say. And that, again, isn't an excuse for sloppy methods, but it's something to consider nonetheless. So, okay, there we have it. We have symmetry. It's symmetric on both sides. It measured out from the center. We have the requisite amount of fringe poking out. That's fine. Readjust this and pin that in place. That is good. Now again, from here, I would sew this. I would baste this flat. I would baste along here to where our fold over is, which sometimes takes a bit of fiddling, but we can see that if I pin it here, and again, the great thing about having the tartan is it's like you've got a grid to work with. Good. So now I can see that if I sew, and again, it's that herringbone stitch again. Let's bring it over just a hair. Let's bring it to that red line, and we'll bring it to that blue line because that's right. I can feel right, that's the edge of the canvas. And at the top here, I can feel the ridge where I've cut away. So here's 2 layers, there's 1 layer, so I know I can do that. So then now I would sew this down and then sew in my strap. And for the rest of it, I'll save for the next lesson. Thank you.